Having a baby at that age, the child will definitely have developmental issues.
Her words changed the atmosphere in the waiting room instantly. Being a woman, a doctor, and having experienced pregnancy and childbirth herself, she should have had better things to say to a worried, expectant mother. Seeing me at a loss for words, she smirked maliciously. I am Hillary, 40 years old. I work as a beauty consultant at a major department store and got divorced a few years ago. My first marriage was 5 years ago. I met my ex-husband John, who is 5 years younger than me, at a group blind date arranged by my younger colleague. I thought a doctor would be in high demand, but most women quickly distanced themselves from his geek appearance and manner of speaking. Even the colleague who invited me quickly moved on to target another man, but for some reason I couldn't walk away. Perhaps it was because neither I nor John, who looked uncomfortable with his hunched shoulders, were getting much attention from others. As I decided to stay and talk, I found his enthusiasm for his interests endearing, and I appreciated his effort to expand our conversation despite his awkwardness. We exchanged contact information and started our relationship as friends. John would contact me daily, and after meeting several times, I realized he was actually a diamond in the rough. As I took it upon myself to help him, he quickly improved and our relationship deepened. After a year of dating, we decided to get married. My parents were thrilled, but his mom seemed concerned about my age. Although she eventually accepted our marriage, she appeared somewhat dissatisfied. Despite some unease, we had a grand wedding, inviting our colleagues and childhood friends.
Congrats on snagging such a handsome guy, Hillary.
It was my much younger childhood friend, Mary, who congratulated me. We first met at a large park in the neighborhood. She was 3 years old, and I was 10. I loved taking care of little kids, so in place of her parents who were chatting with their friends, I often played with her and the other children. Miraculously, our friendship continued, and she became like a little sister to me.
If plain Hillary can get married, then surely I can be happy too, right?
She said this with a carefree smile. I couldn't help but feel my smile stiffen. As an adult, she became a well-regarded doctor in our hometown, known for her beauty and brains, but her personality left much to be desired. Even as a child, she would use her cuteness to get special treatment from adults and then brag about it. When I told her I chose a career in beauty, she laughed and said, "No matter how hard you try, there are things you're born with, but you might be a good example for those people." Because of comments like that, I've never seen her with any female friends besides me. I invited her to the wedding because John said he wanted to invite his childhood friends. But honestly, if it hadn't been for our long history, I might have cut ties with her. Still, she came to celebrate, and seeing her hit it off with John over their shared profession made me feel uneasy. But I reminded myself that I was the one beside him. I was the one who saw potential in John, who was only interested in anime and overlooked by others. At the time, I believed without a doubt that I had found happiness that everyone envied. But reality was harsh, and happiness only lasted the first year. It started with quitting my beloved job at John's request, followed by daily calls from his mom, Sarah, pressuring me for grandchildren. John turned a blind eye to Sarah's demands. Moreover, he started echoing Sarah's hurtful remarks about my age. I couldn't take it anymore and confronted him after work. "You knew I was at an age where natural pregnancy is difficult, right? Why won't you support me?"
That's why I had you quit your jobs to reduce any strain on your body. You should understand that marrying into a family of doctors means we need an heir. You should put in some effort.
Does this guy really think everything can be fixed with effort, even though he's a doctor? Stunned by his unbelievable words, I watched as John quickly finished his business and went to the bedroom. Left alone, I wiped away my tears and quietly discarded the untouched dinner into the sink. Not long after, John stopped coming home, claiming he was busy with work. Though I felt lonely, I was somewhat relieved. Sarah's calls demanding grandchildren decreased, knowing her son was busy, and recently it felt awkward facing John. Still, deep down, I wanted my child too. Without the stress from Sarah, maybe once John settled down, we could naturally conceive. With that faint hope, I devoted myself even more to supporting John, hoping to give him some peace. But those days came to an abrupt end. One day, while John was in the shower, a message notification popped up on his phone. I knew I shouldn't look, but I couldn't turn away. The message suggested a physical relationship with flashing heart emojis. What shocked me most was that it was from my childhood friend, Mary. In disbelief, I confronted John after his shower. At first, he denied it, but when I showed him his phone, he quickly admitted to his affair. No way. Why would you do this? Explain it to me. John, irritated by my tearful voice, began to speak in a half-defiant manner. Mary had joined John's hospital about a year ago and made advances at him during her welcome party. John, never having experienced the attention of a young, beautiful woman, was elated and, under the influence of alcohol, started an affair with her that night. They continued seeing each other, and now she was pregnant with his child. Speechless from the shock, I listened as John continued.
It's your fault. You couldn't get pregnant, and even my mom says this marriage was a mistake.
Wait, does Sarah know about your affair?
Yeah, she found out by chance, but when I told her about the baby, she said I should divorce you and start over. Please, for the sake of her and the baby, agree to our divorce.
Feeling betrayed and panicked, John handed me a completed divorce form. His readiness made me feel even more miserable.
You don't have money for a lawyer, right? If you agree to the divorce, I'll pay alimony and give you a fair share of the assets. You can have this apartment too. It would be wise to comply.
By the time his words sank in, it was too late. John admitted to the affair, but I gave him back his phone with all the evidence. I had no proof, no witnesses who might side with me. Trying to gather evidence now would clearly be too late. My family lived far away, and I had spent all my savings on the wedding and this apartment, leaving no money for a lawyer. It was frustrating, but as I was unemployed at the time, I accepted John's offer. Shortly after the divorce was finalized, a significant amount of money was deposited into my account as John had promised. John then left the apartment, taking almost none of the furniture we had bought together. Betrayed by those close to me, I lived in a daze in the apartment I had been given until I noticed the changing seasons and decided I couldn't go on like this. Determined to make a fresh start, I sold everything. As the room gradually emptied, I found myself looking forward, gaining the energy to search for a new job and a new place to live. It was only then that I felt ready to contact my parents. Not wanting to worry them, I told them the divorce was due to irreconcilable differences. They offered for me to come home, but since Mary's family lived nearby and I didn't want to burden my elderly parents further, I politely declined. I found a new job surprisingly quickly. Once I sold the apartment and lightened my load, I moved into an apartment near my new job, bringing only a bank account with more money and a few personal belongings. My new workplace was a salon that catered to an upscale clientele, requiring more refined manners and service than my previous job. Determined to start anew, I relearned everything from makeup to customer service. Thanks to my efforts, I began receiving more client requests, increasing both my responsibilities and my sense of fulfillment. One day, while I was diligently working, a matchmaking offer came up.
Hey, do you have someone special? If not, would you consider a match?
Excuse me?
I know someone who would be perfect for you.
The offer came from an elderly regular who liked me. I was nearly 40 and had no intention of remarrying, so I planned to politely decline. But she insisted. The match was a 42-year-old man, also divorced. He had divorced over a decade ago due to his ex-wife's excessive spending. If the introduction had come from a relative, it might have been easier to refuse, but it was a valued client. Unable to decline, I agreed to the match. We met directly at a designated restaurant. A few minutes after I started waiting, my match arrived, out of breath.
I'm so sorry to keep you waiting. Ouch.
As he entered the private room, he tripped on the step and fell. A dull thud echoed in the quiet room. Are you okay?
Sorry about that. I'm fine.
I hurried over to him, and our eyes met as he looked up. His nose and forehead were bright red, and the contrast between his serious appearance and the injuries made me laugh. I felt embarrassed for laughing, but he awkwardly scratched his head, sat down again, and bowed politely.
Thank you for meeting me today. My name is Greg Anderson.
That was how we met. Maybe thanks to the initial accident, it didn't take long for us to open up to each other. Though we only spent a few hours together, I was impressed by his polite mannerisms and drawn to his friendly and kind nature, along with his subtle leadership. I had come intending to refuse, but I couldn't say no. Rather, I wanted to see him again. Greg treated me like a treasure, a feeling of happiness I hadn't experienced with John. After a year of dating, Greg proposed, and we decided to get married. Although my parents were initially cautious due to it being my second marriage, they grew fond of Greg after meeting him. Instead of a formal ceremony, we rented a restaurant and held a modest wedding reception with just close family. There were no fancy dresses or elaborate decorations, but it was far more comfortable than the wedding with John. Life with Greg was simple but peaceful, and most importantly, living with someone who always cared for me made me truly happy. Given our ages, we didn't expect to have children and planned to enjoy our life together, hand in hand. One day, during these times, unable to shake off the summer fatigue, I went to the gynecology department of the general hospital my in-laws recommended, suspecting early menopause, only to find out that I was pregnant. What I thought was summer fatigue was actually morning sickness, and what I thought were menopausal symptoms were early pregnancy signs. Still in disbelief, I showed the ultrasound picture with the gestational sac to Greg and told him the test results. Greg looked at the ultrasound and then at me, his mouth opening and closing in shock. He gently touched my stomach.
Is this our baby?
As I nodded quietly, Greg let out a cheer, stood up energetically, and hugged me tightly.
Thank you. I'm so happy. I can't believe it. It's like a miracle.
Calm down. But really, is this good news? Just like he said, A natural pregnancy at our age is indeed a miracle. But thinking about our age, I couldn't fully rejoice. In fact, the hospital congratulated us but also thoroughly explained the risks of a late pregnancy. When the child turns 20, we'll already be 60. Our physical strength is declining, and I'm worried if we can even take care of a baby. In response to my words, Greg gently said,
Sorry, you're right. It's scary. It'd be a lie to say I don't worry about what others might think too. But this baby chose us. I want to be happy about that first.
With that, Greg hugged me softly and continued.
I'm thrilled about the baby, but you're still my number one.
I know, I'm happy too, but I'm also really anxious and honestly a little scared. But more than that, I'm overjoyed, and I can't imagine terminating this precious life that's come to us. I don't want to. Greg quietly nodded at my tearful confession.
Yeah, I feel the same. I know there are risks for you, and I'm sorry, but I want you to have our child. Please.
He pleaded with me. After that, we talked about the pregnancy many times. Even when we calmed down, our feelings remained the same. I want to have this baby. If possible, I want you to have the baby. We made up our minds and informed the doctor during the second checkup that we would proceed with the pregnancy and began making preparations. The obstetrician was experienced and very supportive, and the large, well-equipped hospital with a solid track record was reassuring. We then shared the miracle with our parents. Both my parents and his were surprised but supportive, and when we told them we were determined, they said they would help whenever needed. Later, I completed the necessary paperwork for pregnancy and childbirth. Then came the day for another checkup. Greg, who usually accompanied me, had an unmissable work commitment, so I was alone today. Remembering Greg reluctantly leaving for work after saying, "Call me immediately if anything happens," made me smile. My morning sickness had started to ease, and the baby was growing well. While flipping through a childbirth and parenting magazine in the waiting room,
Is that Hillary?
I heard a familiar voice that made my heart ache. It was my childhood friend, Mary, dressed head to toe in flashy designer brands.
Oh my gosh, it's been ages. Still as plain as ever. How have you been?
I've been good. Feeling uncomfortable, I lowered my gaze. She plopped down next to me with a grin and began talking about her life without being asked. After John left the apartment, he apparently moved in with Mary, who had been living alone, and they started living together. Although their relationship started from an affair, John's parents approved of it. Mary's parents didn't seem to know their engagement began with an affair, so things progressed smoothly, and they got married in less than 6 months. Given how grand our wedding was, it's no surprise everyone close to them knew about it. I suppose John thought it would become a juicy piece of gossip if he quickly divorced me and remarried a young doctor from the same hospital. Shortly after getting married, Mary and John transferred to another hospital. The efficiency of their actions showed their planning, which made me angry in hindsight. Now they've moved to a new place where no one knows them and, with parental support, bought a new home to start afresh.
I'm sorry, Hillary, for taking your husband, but considering the age difference, I was a better match for him. I'm expecting our second child now, and I've been so happy since marrying him.
That's good to hear. I responded dismissively, which seemed to irritate her as she raised her voice another notch.
By the way, why are you here, Hillary? Menopause? You're getting old after all. That's why you were dumped.
Hey, that's not true. Don't shout such nonsense.
Oh, but you don't look unwell. Wait, what?
A maternity brochures I was holding caught her eye.
Hillary, are you pregnant?
Yes, I am. I remarried and I'm almost 5 months along.
Are you going to keep it?
Yes, the doctor is supporting us. As I said that, she burst into laughter.
Is this doctor serious? Having a baby at your age, the child is bound to have developmental issues.
Her words instantly changed the atmosphere in the waiting room. Of course, they did. In a general hospital waiting room, there are people with various concerns. Some might be undergoing fertility treatment, but she didn't seem to care. You're a doctor too, right? How can you say such things? And besides, it's none of your business.
Why are you mad? I'm just worried as a doctor. Besides, your child will be embarrassed in the future. Imagine parent-teacher meetings. They might say, "Your grandma is here."
I couldn't believe my ears at her pretentious and offensive comments. As a woman, a doctor, and someone who has experienced pregnancy and childbirth, she should have had better things to say to a worried, expectant mother. Seeing me at a loss for words, she smirked maliciously. I couldn't stand it any longer. As I was about to leave, an elderly woman sitting next to me gently took my hand.
You don't need to leave. It's okay. I'll ask her to leave.
Huh?
Mary frowned suspiciously at the elderly woman's words. With sunglasses and a mask, I didn't recognize her at first, but I was sure it was her. The elderly woman stood up, removed her sunglasses, and smiled at Mary.
Didn't you hear me? I said, leave. If you can say such things without caring about the patients, you and your husband must be exceptionally good doctors. You can take care of yourselves.
Despite her refined demeanor, her authoritative tone made Mary hesitate.
What right do you have to say that? Hillary, if you know this old lady, do something.
If she says it, I can't.
Why not?
Because she's the wife of the chairman of this hospital.
What?
Yes, she was the former regular customer who introduced me to my husband Greg. And incidentally, she is also my aunt-in-law, one of the people who were most delighted by my pregnancy. As Mary stood there in shock, Aunt Sally continued.
We cannot inconvenience other patients by allowing you here.
Are you telling me to switch hospitals now? This is the only one close to us with decent facilities. I'm pregnant.
That's your problem, isn't it? First of all, we do not accept troublemakers in public places, whether they're pregnant or patients. Please leave.
Mary, realizing Aunt Sally wouldn't budge, glared at me furiously.
Remember that. You poor people are cocky.
Poor? Maybe once, but she's wealthy enough now to have a personal shopper.
What?
Because her husband is my nephew, an executive at the large medical equipment manufacturer, Swan Group, and the heir to the company.
The Swan Group?
Mary's face turned pale. I didn't know until after we married, but my husband's company is the largest in its field, dealing with hospitals nationwide, known to every medical professional. They also make substantial donations to numerous hospitals. At that moment, my husband, out of breath, rushed in. Apparently, Aunt Sally had contacted him, and he came during his lunch break. Usually gentle, his face was now filled with anger.
Are you all right? I heard everything from Auntie Sally. Are you the doctor who insulted my wife in public?
No, I mean.
The thought of someone like you working in a hospital is appalling. To prevent others from suffering like my wife, I will make sure this incident is shared with other hospitals.
My husband's words were the final blow. Upon hearing them, Mary hurriedly left, almost running away. Shortly after, Aunt Sally informed her husband, the chairman, and this incident spread in two directions, eventually being shared with almost all hospitals nationwide. Apparently, Mary's arrogant attitude had often antagonized patients before, and her employer had been unhappy with her for some time. The same applied to John, and both ended up on a blacklist. Almost no hospitals were willing to hire them as a couple. Sometime later, I received an angry call from Mary. According to her, after being forced to leave the hospital, the two of them turned to John's parents for help and took over the clinic they ran. However, doctors who neglect their patients are not accepted by the local community. The clinic quickly went under, and John's parents were furious with them, leading to their estrangement. Now, they both work from morning till night to support their children, living a life far from luxurious. She lamented that their annual income has dropped to less than a third of what it used to be, but I felt no sympathy. I quietly ended the call and blocked her number. I never heard from her again. By the way, I successfully gave birth to a beautiful baby girl with chubby cheeks. She drinks plenty of milk, sleeps well, and is growing healthily. Greg is already smitten, saying things like, "I get teary-eyed just thinking about her marrying someone else someday." I didn't realize people actually said that. In the end, he said, "All right, I'm going to play with her as much as I can now," and bought lots of toys and other stuff. He seems likely to become a very doting dad, which worries me a little. No matter what happens in the future, no matter how tough it gets, we are determined to raise her with love and responsibility as a couple.